Hi, this is my response to our discussion board 9 on problems that the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender individuals and what challenges they face as far as in this diversified world that we live in. To answer the question, what is the most serious problem for the LGBT individuals? Is it homophobia, cultural heterosexism, or structural heterosexism? I think we have to define those terms first. And so in our book, homophobia is defined as, it literally means a hatred or fear of gays and lesbians, and it can be blatant and overt, or it could be subtle and indirect. Then our next term would be cultural heterosexism, which refers to an ideology that upholds that heterosexuality is the norm and that societal privilege is given to those in heterosexual relationships. And then we look at structural heterosexism, and that refers to ways that heterosexual people if I understood it correctly, it was kind of almost like heterosexual privilege. So I think we had to define those terms before we could determine which one the LGBT individuals have the most serious problem. And then, of course, could any of these three types of groups exist in the absence of the other two? Kind of a big question. In reading, I tried to decide what would be the biggest challenge or the most serious problem that these individuals encounter. And I felt like maybe the fear, the homophobia, was maybe the most serious problem because it's a fear of or a hatred of. And I think anytime we have fear and hatred focused on a group, then that is that group's biggest serious problem in society. Now, having said that, I think when we look at the other two terms, cultural and structural heterosexism, as most of us are, again, kind of goes back to what we just talked in our last chapters about gender identities and those things. We are brought up, most of us, I was born a girl, so my mom tried to steer me, to play with dolls and play house, and I could be a nurse or I could be a teacher, and so it kind of is in that socialization as a young person that we learn some of our gender identity. And so I think if we look at cultural and structural, we're taught boys do these, girls do this, a boy and girl should be married, and that is also a biblical belief that I uphold. However, I think when we look as a society, we still have to have recognition of these other types of relationships and people that they identify with. They have rights. They should not be discriminated against. But it is something that we definitely encounter on a daily basis. I think that could homophobia exist in the absence of the cultural or the structural heterosexism? I don't think so, because it's through that, the cultural, in our culture, in our socialization, that we experience these thoughts and beliefs. So then if we are brought into a situation where we encounter someone that doesn't believe in our same fashion, that can bring fear, and that can unfortunately lead some people to have a hate for anyone different than themselves. Back to the whole issue of diversity. While we may not agree with certain choices people make in all realms, we can still learn to accept the person as a person and not worry about or be concerned with their sexual orientation, their race, their gender, their beliefs. So kind of goes back to where this whole class has come from, is learning to interact and be respectful of all peoples in all situations. So I don't know. I hope that answered the question. I think homophobia is probably the biggest challenge. Unfortunately, it's really hard to decide because those terms all go hand in hand and intertwine so much. So can't wait to hear some other thoughts, and we'll see how this goes. Thanks.